One of the important things about ministry is be prepared for surprises. The PowerPoint would not work this morning. Therefore, you get to take a lot of notes based on what I say, not what you see. Okay. In Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 1 and following, and I won't go through it in detail, but Jesus also assigned his disciples some very specific things that they needed to be doing. And one of the things that I think is important about a presentation in that, a lot of things we could talk about, is we are commanded to try. Nowhere are we commanded to succeed in things, because if you read that passage in Luke 10, verses 1 to 11, the whole focus is go out there, present the good news, do your best, but be wise about what you do. So every Christian has that responsibility to use wisdom in how they present the good news, what they try to accomplish, how long they stay, who they interact with, a number of things like that. So this morning I wanted to talk to you about vocational missions. I think that is something that is an area that we really need to develop. I wanted to talk about it for a lot of reasons. Number one, that's the kind of mission activity that Cecilia and I have been in for something over 50 years, and we believe it has been very effective. It's been very positive for us. We're also seeing around the world that there's increasing population. We're seeing increasing antagonisms toward Christians and Christian missionaries. We're seeing hostility that exhibits itself in a variety of ways: government restrictions, social restrictions, just outright violence. So we need to find alternative ways to reach people and present the gospel to them. Sometimes in some areas, if a person is known to be a missionary, it's almost like they're targeted, and I think that's unfortunate. As he read just a few moments ago in Scripture, there are certainly examples in the New Testament of vocational missions. Therefore, it's not a closed subject. It's not something which we should not ever consider. And I really believe that we in the Lord's church need to diversify our outreach efforts and our modes to get better results. We don't want to put everything into basically one area. And that's one of the good things about SIBI that many of you are noticing. We have different avenues and different approaches, different tools, and as a consequence of that, I believe that we're getting the good news out in many places. Many of you, as you leave here, will have the opportunity to make some choices, and one of the choices I hope that you will consider is going into vocational missions. Now you say, well, am I qualified? Well, if you have a marketable skill, you are. Or if you don't have one, but you think you can get one fairly rapidly or within a reasonable period of time, yes, you can be a vocational. Ideally, you have to be a self-starter, because we don't have a whole lot of structure out there to help you in this area, so you have to be somewhat independent and a self-starter. And if you just love adventure. If you know the good news, if you don't know the good news after you've been here for 2 years, I worry about you. Okay. You may know so much of the good news that you have a hard time sorting out some stuff. But anyway, so what are some potential avenues for those who would like to go into vocational missions? I'll just go through a very rapid list. There are many relief organizations, both secular and religious, around the world, and some of these would be suitable for you to be involved in. There are multinational corporations that have offices and business activities in many, many cultures. In the years past, that was a very rational way to go about reaching people and being a vocational missionary. As things have developed, Many of the multinationals now are trying to use the locals as much as they can and not bring in Americans, because generally they have to pay Americans more money, and that affects the bottom line. There's there's avenues for those who would like to go into, say, journalism or TV reporting. Obviously, they don't pay a lot, but still, it's employment. There are many government agencies, U.S. government agencies, that have offices scattered around the world. And when I talk about vocational missions, it doesn't have to be foreign. There are many, many places inside this country that the church is woefully absent. And there are niches for you to fill in those places, so you don't have to learn a new language, a new culture. Basically, you can fit in fairly rapidly. Many times, chambers of commerce have contacts in other countries because they are trying to develop international activities. If you are skilled in agriculture, there's probably a role for you, because many places around the world, the level of agricultural expertise is very low. And if you've gained any knowledge at all about agriculture, there's probably a niche. If you know how to drill water wells, that's a tremendous activity, particularly in Africa, where we were. It seems like that's a major problem across the whole continent, is questions of water. Those who have medical nursing skills, there's always an avenue. There's always openings in other countries for that. Many people would like to, say, go into the military and do this. Well, that's possible, but it also means that very often your tenure at any one spot may be rather limited. You may be moved rather rapidly. We noticed that there are opportunities among universities for people with special skills, and they can transfer faculty back and forth between various universities. And we noticed that in South Africa. We met people who had been transferred to the University of Natal in Durban from American universities for a period of time to use their special expertise. Also, we encountered one that was at the University of Cape Town that gave them some special inroads and activities. U.S. sports tend to fascinate other cultures. They don't understand them. Sometimes they think our sports are rather weird, but they still would like to learn them, and things like basketball and baseball particularly. So that's an area. Go on, there's all kinds of lists. People have asked me, what do you do? Well, these are the ways that you find your employment, your income. The thing about vocations I think we need to be aware of, there are many, many, many in our brotherhood that are doing just exactly that. They don't gain much fanfare. Some years ago, I was with a group of preachers, and we were talking about a variety of topics, and the name of one of our preaching friends came up in the discussion, and I was really shocked, the response that I heard. He had lost his support, and therefore was out. He had a secular job, and some of the comments from the other preachers were, he's left preaching. He doesn't preach anymore. Well, I asked, well, what does he do? Well, yeah, he preaches Sunday morning and Sunday night, teaches Wednesday night, and has home Bible classes, but he didn't preach anymore. I said, I think we have a problem here, because that's not the way I see things. The fact that he just got his livelihood from some other source seemed like to me did not disqualify him for preaching. If you go into vocational missions, and I'll give very briefly, generally speaking, you will, if you go to a foreign country, you'll probably have a salary less than what you'd get in the United States, so you just have to be ready for that. You'll have opportunities in many cultures for vacation time. Many cultures have more vacation time than we do, and that's desirable. And there are some downsides to being a vocational missionary, but what I'd really like to tell you is something a little bit about what we did, and perhaps that will give you some ideas and some clues about what you could accomplish in this same kind of role. I wish my wife were here this morning because I would really like for the ladies to be able to talk with her. As children, both of us move rather frequently, so the idea of move is not terrifying. We met at the Bible chair here at Broadway and then married, and since that time we both have advanced our degrees. She has a Master of Science in Bible and Ministry, and I have some other degrees as well. And I could talk to you about some of the other guys. I have 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 5 granddogs. So, but I don't have time to get into all that. 1994, we began senior aim here. But to look at our pattern, and maybe you can tie into it and understand some things that perhaps might apply to you. When we first married, we moved to Port Arthur, Texas. I worked for Texaco in their lube oil research department. And after we were there for a short period of time, I was made a deacon at the congregation, which was rather amazing. And we had been there for a while. I was teaching Bible classes. The elders asked me one time that would I like to teach a Bible class. I said, well, I'll think about it. And they said, yes, you will. And here's your classroom. And now it's up to you to go find your students. So we had to recruit. We were there for about 4 years, and then we engaged in Exodus Bayshore, which was an effort in 1963 that we were going to move Christians into an area on Long Island about an hour from Manhattan. And the idea was to establish a congregation that could influence that part of the world, and I think that was tremendous opportunity. Everybody who traveled, 83 family units, made that move, and everybody found their own employment when they got there. In my case, I was hired by Brookhaven National Laboratories about a week before we were destined to leave here to go there, and I was going to work on a special nuclear engineering project, and turned out to be quite an interesting episode. And then in 1966, C and I decided that we would like to do something else. So we learned that South Africa had an assisted immigration program. So we decided to move to South Africa. First time any of our family, her side or my side, either one, had ever lived east of the Mississippi. So this is a considerable change. We had 4 small children. So for about 4 to 6 weeks, I was unemployed. We got to South Africa, a located job. I can't say that I did it. God provided it. And it was a rather incredible situation that I walked into. I was treated as a South African, paid as a South African, and viewed as a South African in spite of my accent, which I soon changed, by the way. Paid about 60% of what an American would have received. But that gave us the opportunity to do what we wanted to do, so we established our home there until 1982. And our 3 daughters graduated from high school there and went to Southern Africa Bible College before they transferred to Lubbock Christian. And our son was in the 11th grade upon our departure. If we had stayed 1 more year, he would have been in the South African military, and we thought that was not appropriate. So we relocated to Beaumont, Texas, and that is at a time when the company I was with, there were absolutely no new hires, no moves, no relocations, nothing like this could occur, but God intervened again, and it happened. I was at Beaumont for about 6 months, and there was a massive layoff of engineers at the refinery. I was the newest hire on the payroll, but I was not let go. So again, God was involved. So since that time, we've been blessed the last 49 years through that employment that I received there, and it allows Senior AIM and Cecilia and myself to be financially solvent, and I think that's been a remarkable thing. If you don't believe in miracles, just let me talk about that one. I think it's remarkable. As vocational missionaries, I'd like to give you some idea of what you can do, and the best way for me to do that is, what did we do? Well, we taught congregational Bible classes. I taught the teenage class for 11 years, and it was quite an interesting experience. We did home Bible studies. I preached every now and again as needed. I did have a situation where at one stage our preacher wouldn't show up, and so I got to preach on maybe 2 minutes' notice, and so you guys better be ready. Those things happen. I had to learn a whole new business model, a lot of new geography, a very new culture, and my responsibilities at the company that I was with. I covered about a land area roughly 1/3 the size of the United States, and I was totally responsible for ensuring that none of our marketing people ever ran out of product. And that's quite a challenge. In due course, Cecilia and I really got involved in Southern Africa Bible College. Both of us were involved there. We spoke on the lectureships, and I was on the board. We had a national publication that went to 17 nations, and I was a member of the board of that, as also wrote lots of articles. But now, how do we do all that? Well, basically, as a vocational missionary, what you have to do is pace yourself and be aware of what's going on. So in the morning, I would walk from our house to the train station in Cape Town. It took half an hour. It's good exercise. And fortunately, it never snows there. Well, that's not true. It snowed once in the last 350 years. Okay. Which is pretty good. It could be a little bit cool. But I walked the train station. Of course, in the walk, I have time to think about, the day. I had a 40-minute train ride. That gave me time to write lessons, prepare sermons, develop various and sundry things. And then at the office, everything was focused on office. At 5 o'clock or 5:30 or whenever I could leave, I turned it off, got back on the train, and worked on my lessons and Bible studies and such. Cecilia kept herself very active. She was working with a seniors group. We had some baptisms that came out of that. She sang in a local community group that gave her insight and contact with South Africans. And we, by the way, had a lot of immigrants there. Our neighbors next door to us are actually from London, and so we had a lot of interaction. She taught about 100 piano students. That gave her, again, tremendous reach into people's lives and activities. Both of us wrote for publication, and we presented lessons at the Southern Africa Bible School lectureships each year. That's only about a 1,000-mile drive from Cape Town. People look at South Africa and look, boy, that sure looks small. It's over twice the size of Texas, and so the distances are rather large. She helped me with the youth programs. I said I taught the youth for about 11 years in a row, and she helped me with that quite a lot. And then we had Americans coming in. We had several Sunset families came in, and because of the social, political, economic dynamics in the country, they really needed to be aware of some stuff, since they had to get their visas renewed from time to time. I didn't. Cecilia and I had permanent residence visas, so we never had to go back and get clearance anymore. But we tried to help them get adjusted to the South African world, and some of you may be able to remember and recall some of the very unfortunate news stories that you got out of South Africa back in the 70s and 80s. Largely incorrect, but still a problem. I had a couple of adventures, and I can't promise you as a vocational missionary that you'll have these adventures, but one morning at about 7 o'clock, I got a call from one of the radio moderators, and he wanted to know if I would be prepared to be on a national radio call-in program that night dealing with science and scripture. It'd be basically a national debate. And I agreed. By the time I got to the office, everybody at the office had already heard, because what we were talking about was recorded and rebroadcast umpteen times. Didn't have questions like they had to have my written approval to do that. They just did things. So we had a fairly extensive radio program that night across all of South Africa. Later on, I was invited to be involved in a national television program dealing with Genesis. There were 6 of us on that panel, national TV program. I had a very incredible account. I was asked to go to Salisbury, Rhodesia. Some of you know where that is. Today it's Harare, Zimbabwe, but at the time it was Salisbury, Rhodesia. A group of us went there, and our goal was to ensure that the Rhodesian government would ensure that in the classes in the public schools that the creation account would be presented at least equal time with that of the Darwinian nonsense. Okay. We were successful. That was good. I don't have time to tell you about the rather incredible flight that we had. Later on, after it had changed hands, I was asked to come back, and I spoke at a communist high school there in Harare on the question of creation in Genesis. So that the point I'm trying to make about that is not to draw attention to me, but to give you an idea that sometimes if you go this route, you will have opportunities that you did not expect, but you better be ready, because something will happen. What I'd recommend, if any of you are really interested in this kind of approach to missions, I tell you what, it can be an adventure. There can be hard times. There can be positive times. And it doesn't fit everybody. But I think it is certainly a viable option for many, many people. I have, Mr. C and I have both written a paper on this, several pages, and obviously I didn't have time to go through that in any great detail today. But if you would like to have a copy of that particular document that we've both written, if you would write your name on a piece of paper and give it to me, then I'll get a copy to you next week. Because I didn't see use in making a bunch of copies today and cutting down a bunch of trees and then find out I didn't need to do that. So, what would, if you could decide to go this route, what would you need? I think there are several things that would be very important to make this role ever more effective. Number one, you need to find a church home here that understands what you're doing and is willing to back you up and give you encouragement, because things are just difficult in another culture, particularly if you're being paid at the local level, being treated as a local, and you don't have these guaranteed trips back to the United States. In 16 years, we had 4 trips. So today, when I hear about people have to have an annual trip back to the U.S., it's somewhat appalling. It worked out all right for us. But you need a contact here that's willing to pray for you, willing to send you information. And with today's electronics, you've got email, Skype, you've got all kinds of options that can be used to really make the contact back and forth a lot easier. As I said, when we would write a letter from Cape Town to Lubbock, it'd take about 2 weeks for the letter to get here. When they would sit down immediately and write a response, it'd take 2 weeks for us to get it back. And telephone calls were 6 cents a second. So basically, we pretty much had to do things on our own without a whole lot of input from this side. And one of the important things would be to know that there's somebody from where you have come from that's really interested in you. And I think that probably gives you as much benefit as anything. And some of you might be interested in this now. It could be that you're saying right now, no, I'm not interested in this kind of an approach, but down the road you might change your mind. If you do, I'd really like to visit with you about it, because we need to find ways to get the good news out. And let's use all the rational, sensible avenues that we can, and not just, you might say, do what we've been doing for the last multiple decades, but let's do a little bit of innovative adventure and trying to do some things which would expand the kingdom, and at the same time, it'll give you a tremendous sense of involvement. And you'll have a sense that you've actually done something that's benefited a lot of people. Thank you.